Today on Air Capital Hot Rods Garage, we're going to work on our fuel system. Hi guys, so like I said, today we're going to work on our fuel system. I got to install a fuel pump, a fuel filter, some lines, and some hoses to hook up our fuel tank. So obviously the Chevelle was carbureted, so it has your regular tank and sending unit and all that stuff, no in-tank fuel pump and everything. So I'm going to use an external fuel pump, and then we're going to plumb it up. It has 3/8 inch feed line and return line already installed. The previous owner just happened to install a return line for me, so that's nice. So I'm going to install this Walbro 255 pump. And this is just a stock GM type fuel filter. So it has these O-ring type connections on here. So I got these pieces of line with the proper connections. They're from Dorman. This fuel filter is GF652. And this fuel pump is GSL392. And it says 20 amp fuse required, which is what I have in there. I was going to put a 400 liter per hour AM fuel pump in there, but then I actually ordered that part, and it has like a -14 feed on it and required a lot of amperage, so I decided I don't really, not planning on getting 1200 horsepower right now that thing could feed. So this should be sufficient for our NA 6 liter with the cam. Eventually, if I do turbo, I will have to upgrade fuel pumps. At that point, I'd probably get a different tank and put the fuel pump in the tank and do some other upgrades. So I know this may be temporary, but this is what we're going with today. So I'm hoping to mount this on the fuel rail, which is below the tank a little bit. So gravity will naturally feed it down to it, which will help it. These like to be mounted as close to the tank as possible and low. So that's where we're gonna get it to. And then I'm gonna flare this line into this fitting, connect these, connect this to the existing line, and then run it up towards the engine. And then I'm going to have to cut off the existing hard lines there, put on some fittings there, and then run some braided fuel lines up to our fuel rails. Now, my particular fuel rails, the regulator is on the fuel rail, so there's a return line right there, so I'll be running 2 lines to and from it. So quite a bit of work to do, so let's get started. Also, this fuel pump, it just basically comes with this the fuel pump alone. This is a fitting that I got it's from Fergola or something like that. And then I also bought the mounting kit for this pump, but it's separate. This is like $12–13. It looks like a 400-939 fuel pump installation kit. So it comes with hose barbs to go into the fuel pump, a little jacket, mounting clamps, O-rings, and then nuts and wiring stuff for it. One particular thing about this fuel pump is these are metric threaded fittings, so it's kind of oddball size. And so I got hose barb here. So I'm going to connect to the existing fuel line on the low pressure side, so before the pump, with just rubber hose. That'll give me a little bit of wiggle room for everything, so that, especially when I replace this fuel filter, I can, the rubber hose over here will give me some movement like this, so I can get that out. And I don't think I'm gonna leave this long. I gotta get under the car and kind of come up with a plan on how I'm gonna route everything and route and mount everything. So that's our next step. Also, for this, I got a new tube bender here. Should be pretty handy. Looks like this is a Imperial brand, so I stepped up. I have the cheap $10 ones, you know, and they work marginally good. I also have a Eastwood tubing flare with the proper fittings for the AN fittings. So normally a double flared fitting is, I believe, at 45 degrees, and the ANs are at 37 degrees, so they're not compatible, so you have to get the additional set for that. We'll show you that later. It's a great tool to have in your toolbox. Also got a new tubing cutter, just because mine was worn out, so but we'll get started. All right, I got a little view underneath the car here. So here's our frame rail right here, and like I said, we got two lines. Like I said, we have two lines here, and I marked which one is the return line, so I don't have to figure that out. And right here, this is the lower control arm for the rear. So right here is the lower control arm. And this is kind of the area that I'm wanting to mount the fuel pump, and then the fuel filter, and then it can go on up to the car, or to the engine. So kind of have to figure out a way to get that all mounted in here. So that's where we're at. Probably going to have to bend this return line down kind of out of the way a little bit, and then cut the supply line. So I removed all the clips that were holding this onto the frame, so I can work with it a little bit. So we'll keep working. All right, back on the workbench here. So here's a fuel pump and our filter, and so the best location is kind of sliding it back into the opening of the frame. And so I'm just gonna flare this about as short as I can, so there'll be just this little piece of tubing here, one with this O-ring fitting on, like I said, and then the other with an AN fitting. So I'm going to work on flaring that. Alright, so we've got our Eastwood flaring tool here in the vise, just mounted in there nice and good. Like I said, this is the standard like brake line double flare die, I guess you would call that. Put the handle in here, right here, and here's the AN fitting, 37 degree fitting. Alright, and 5/8 inch dies that we'll be using. And we'll take this line, new tube cutter. Need to make sure that we got enough room and everything for all this to work out, so I'm going to cut it about there. And actually, okay, so this is just a rigid tube cutter, and I just go slow, crank it down every revolution or so. Usually goes pretty quick. And there we have it. All right. So what you want to do is deburr that. Outside's pretty smooth, inside's nice and smooth now. Okay. Don't forget, put your fittings on here. A tube nut and a tube sleeve. And so basically the nut slides down into the sleeve, and then we'll feed this onto there. And so when you flare that, that sits against your flare, and that seals it all up. So you put this in your die, put the top on. Oops. Gotta back this off a little bit. There we go. Put it in. Okay, I usually, this is. So what I usually do is lightly tighten this, and then you push this back, and so that it's pushing the tube back into the proper position. Tighten it down a little bit more, and then push it back all the way, and then tighten it down. Okay. And then basically this tells you what to do. So you got operation 1 and then operation 2. So we go 3/8 inch tubing, operation 1 for 3/8 inch, and you just push it in. Which, there we go. And then you go to operation 2 and push it in. And it should be done. And look at that. Flared fitting. That should go over our nut. Yeah, it's pretty tight. There we go. All right. Make sure this is clean. All right, so then that flare is going to join up with the flare fitting on our fuel pump here. And look at that. It's done. All right, so now we got our fuel pump assembled to our fuel filter. The flow arrows are going in the right direction. So now I'm going to go back underneath the car, see where I'm going to tie this in. So I'm going to flare this one and flare the other fuel line, put a union on there, and that'll mount that, and then put this fitting on there, or hose on there, and put a hose on the fuel line. So should be pretty simple. We'll put our handy dandy sleeve on there. All right, bringing up to speed on where we're at on the fuel system. So I got the fuel pump mounted here, got the hose barb, and just run a hose up to the hard line coming from the tank. This here is just to temporarily block it from flowing fuel out. So got that mounted, got the fuel filter. Then I have some AN fittings here. This is a compression AN fitting onto the existing line that was here. And then I flared this part of that line, that hard line. And then continuing on down, it's kind of hard to see. So have a couple AN fittings on there into my hard lines, and then I made up 2 stainless steel braided hoses to go from here up to the fuel rail, and I will show you those. So here are my 2 hoses, feed and supply, or feed and return. Basically these are just AN6 fittings, 3/8 inch hose. If you haven't ever made up braided hoses, watch a YouTube video on it. The gist of it is you wrap some electrical tape around there, cut it down the middle of it, and then that electrical tape will prevent it from unbraiding, so you can get this fitting over the hose. So once you shove that down, or shove the hose into the fitting, then you take this top part of it and it threads down into the hose, so it kind of pushes that hose out and secures it all, so you know that's not coming off. So got 2 of these made up. Come around here to my fuel rail here. So there's my return and there's my feed, and got these -6 connectors from ICT Billet. So even though this is smaller, it's still -6. So from my 2 braided hoses down to those hard lines, and other than that little piece of rubber hose and connecting up the fuel pump, I think our fuel system will be done for right now. Alright, we're going to try to mount up our gas pedal here. Of course, LS engines, a lot of them take a drive-by-wire throttle body, and therefore you have to have a drive-by-wire gas pedal, which is what this is, out of my 2002 Yukon. So to get it out, I had to cut the wires here, so I'm going to have to splice the 2 into the connectors. So I'm going to mount it down on the firewall. Now, I've already removed the gas pedal. Try to get some light here. So that's where the gas pedal was, and this is offset, so you have to mount it close to the steering. Here's the steering column right there, so you got to mount it close there. So trying to do this all one-handed, it's kind of difficult. So what I did is pull out the carpet there, and I drilled this hole right there and this one up here, and I'm gonna put Rivnuts in there. So if you don't know what a Rivnut is, okay, if you don't know what a Rivnut is, basically it's this little thing. You put it through the sheet metal, use a special tool, which is right here, and it pulls this and deforms it with those knurls there, and then it's threaded on the inside, so your bolt will just thread in there. Then you don't have to go on the other side of the firewall and try to get a nut on there and stuff like that, and it's going to be stronger than just a sheet metal screw or something. I suppose you probably could just sheet metal screw this to the firewall, but I feel this is more secure and a little bit better quality, so this is what we're going to go with. I already have this tool, so bought it off Amazon a while ago. Seems to work pretty good. These are 5/16 inch bolt. Have to drill out the gas pedal for the larger bolt. Ideally I would have just used 1/4 inch bolt or something, but I don't have that size of attachments for this tool, so I'm not going to be able to film this one-handed and everything, so I'll pop them in, then we'll see you back here. Alright, so that took about 2 minutes, and I got 2 Rivnuts in there, so hopefully my gas pedal will just bolt up there.
Be right back. All right, there's our LS gas pedal in there. Sat in the seat, tried it out. Seems to be in a pretty good position. One thing you got to worry about is whether or not you got full travel on the gas pedal, which I do, and then also kind of the position of it. This is pretty good. It's kind of hard to see. Pretty good here. Might be out just a little bit farther than what I would like, but it's pretty good. And then maybe just a little bit further apart, but really, without doing a bunch of custom brackets and stuff, this has a bunch of rheostats in it. So the rheostats housing, or whatever you want to call it, is up against the steering shaft, or steering column. So there's really not any room to move it to the left any. So I think that's where it's going to be for now. So not too bad. This one, since the firewall is pretty flat right there, went in pretty easy. The other drive-by-wire LS swaps I've done, I had to make a custom bracket to mount that and everything. So this was a little bit easier. So anyways, thanks. All right, let me catch you up to speed here. So I got the accessories installed. Down here, I got a new power steering pulley. That's from Dirty Dingo. It's a little bit smaller diameter, so it doesn't hit the power steering gearbox. And then I had to get a shorter belt. This is a Gates K060910 HD. So it fit fine. I'm not real happy. I think the green looks stupid or kind of out of place, but hey, it is what it is. Got the radiator installed here with my electric fans. Got the up radiator hose installed. This is just the stock truck hose. It fit just about perfect. Tucks up here pretty nice, not kinked. The lower hose is also from a truck. I trimmed just a couple inches off over here, and it fits pretty nice. Then I was able to plug in the heater hoses into the water pump. Had to trim this hose just a little bit. Got the intake installed, got the coils installed. When I was working on stuff, here's my fuel pressure regulator, and it has this hose here, and it has a little end, and that tore. So I got this little concoction rigged up while I wait for a new one to come in. One thing that is going to slow me down a little bit from firing this up is my power steering hose here. This is a metric O-ring fitting. I think it's like 18 millimeter, I can't remember, like 1.5 maybe. And then the power steering port down here on this gearbox is 11/16 inch. And so I was trying to figure out how to do that, and I was, one method is you could cut this off and flare it and put that tube nut on there that goes into the gearbox. But when I sold the engine, the hoses went with that engine, so didn't grab that. And then if I cut this off, it's going to make it short, and this U-bend here is going to hit. I suppose I could have cut it off here, but again, I don't have that tube nut. So what I did is I found that CPP. I can't remember what it stands for. They make an adapter that will thread into the power steering gearbox, and then it's female threads for this fitting. So once I get that adapter, I should be able to thread that in there and then thread this in. One note for the other people here that apparently the previous owner didn't know. There's a little bit of like Teflon tape remnant here. This is an inverted flare fitting. Inverted flare fittings, they seal on that inverted flare, not the threads. So you don't need Teflon tape or anything like that. That's not your sealing mechanism. So, just like on this metric fitting, the threads aren't the sealing mechanism. It's the O-ring. So, NPT, National Pipe Threads, your tapered thread is the sealing mechanism. But most other fittings, they're not. So, don't put Teflon tape on crap that doesn't need it. It just introduces it potentially into places where it's not supposed to be. That's my quick tip for today. The other big thing I got done today is all the wiring. I got some cleanup here to do to make it look pretty and everything. I want to test everything out before I really spend the time to make it look pretty. Because, like, for example, these two wires here, they're going to run along here, and I already prettied this up in this cable here. So I'm going to have to take that apart and retape it and everything. So I want to test everything. I got to run this wire here down to the fuel pump, and then the fuel system will be taken care of. And then I got 2 ground wires that go from the frame to the engine down there that I got to take care of. Yeah, and so all the interior wiring's done. So I wired up a check engine light. That's just 2 wires coming from the my fuse block here and the ECM. I wired up the OBD2 port. That's a couple wires, and put in a wire for the brake switch, so it's constant power coming back to the ECM, and then when you hit the brake you lose power. So I have a brake switch from like a 1986 Camaro that fits in here, and will take care of that for me. So there's just lots of little things that you got to tweak, and those lots of little things add up. Got for my transmission cooler, come over here. I got these AN banjo fittings. So my 4L80Es, the early ones, so both of these are the same. If you have a later one, you'll have a plug that's longer on one of them. I think that goes in the rear cooling outlet or inlet, whichever. I looked that up so that you put it in the right place. You have to have that long extension for the newer pieces. I got these off of eBay, and they had the longer ones too. So anyway, these thread in there, and then you have additional clearance. So that'll help me out there. And then got my oil pressure gauge hooked up. It's on the back of the engine. Obviously it's really tight. Got my fuel hoses here. I'm waiting on a couple of clamps that'll keep those together and everything. But they're there and plumbed and threaded in there. So yeah, we are getting close. So in the next video, I'm going to fire this up. So the next video may be 4 weeks out, but it's going to be in the next video. No, hopefully it'll be pretty soon when this bad boy gets running. So I haven't made it to the shop to have a new my drive shaft modified. I'm going to have to shorten it just a bit, I believe. I probably should have already done that because it's going to slow me down a little bit from actually driving it. But you know, I've got to, once I'm ready to fire this up, I got to get in there with the computer and program some stuff, take a bunch of emission stuff off, and then with this being a bigger cam and stuff, I'm going to have to modify the programming for the cam. So I have a little bit of time before I'm ready to actually go drive. So yeah, it's coming along and it's getting close. So with that, if you like the video, subscribe, hit the like button, and thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you later.